What's up, you absolute beauties? Welcome back to High and Wide Hockey, the place where Flyers talk is always raw, real, and just a little rowdy. This is episode 9 of season 8, and I'm your host, Jim Iacovone, joined as always by the one and only Jack Smith. And if you're watching this on YouTube, do us a solid, smash the subscribe button, ring the bell, and join the conversation in the chat. And for all you podcast listeners, hit the subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you're first in line when a fresh episode drops. Jack, it's finally hockey season. The Flyers rookies are back this week, and they are in town, or they will be in town for this weekend's rookie games against the New York Rangers, who they take on Friday night at 7 p.m. and 5 p.m. on Saturday night. Both games are in Allentown at the PPL Center, where the Philadelphia Phantoms play. But bottom line, Jack, Flyers hockey's around the corner. They held a press conference today, which we'll talk about for a lot of the episode. Keith Jones and Dan Hilferty held, I guess it was like a state of the organization sort of press conference, right?
Basically, Keith Jones mentioned at some point that Danny would probably be speaking next week. So we'll see what that's about. But yeah, I mean, when those two are up there taking questions and talking, what else could it possibly be?
Yeah. And you know, we'll touch on some rumors later in the show. Actually, you know what, Jack? Let's let's open with that, because we could speculate a little bit. And I wonder if it's going to run into kind of what Jonesy referenced during the press conference. And we'll get to that. We're going to kind of dissect the presser a little bit here. We have the video ready to put up for you guys, just in case you haven't seen it. But we'll take it step by step, pausing along the way. Jack and I are going to kind of dissect. But the Minnesota Wild put an offer on the table for Kirill Kaprizov to be the richest NHL player in the world today. And he didn't sign. Now, I believe the contract was for 8 years. The money escapes me. Do you have the money number?
He turned down an 8-year, $128 million contract extension for the Minnesota Wild. The deal would have made him the highest paid player in NHL history based on total money and average annual ballot.
And he turned that down.
Why would
you turn that down, Jack? Like why would a player do that? Like, you can't, unless you're right, unless that's not the max, unless he wants more.
Well, that I do think he wants out of Minnesota, to be honest with you.
Minnesota's become a dump up there.
Yeah, I think so. The max is whatever 20% of the salary cap is. So I know it went up, so it changed. So I forget what it was. Thought it was 16 or ish or something. Must be higher. But I love Kaprizov too, but $16 million. Now, if I'm Minnesota, you do whatever you got to do to keep the guy. But if he's turning that down, it's almost like, what do we got to do? Go to the max, or we just let him walk at this point because he really doesn't want to be here. And it does. That's exactly what it sounds like. I always heard a rumor that he wanted to play for Chicago. So ultimately, we'll find out. But if you're hitting free agency with the cap going up, you'll get an awful lot of money too. So that was wild. No pun intended. Yeah, everything of that screams to me he wants out.
Is that too much for you to bring him to Philly?
Oh, that's a good question, Jim. Where we sit right now, not much is too much. My problem is Kaprizov. I mean, you think he's a wing, and him and Mishkov make a lot of sense, but we cannot be spending that. I mean, look, if he's one of the only guys that gets out there, just get whoever you can get. You make it work later, make trades, whatever. But we really need that money for center. So if you have a choice between, let's say, Eichel and Kaprizov, you gotta go all in on Eichel. But if he's the only guy there, really worth it, you got to consider it. And maybe we just look at this rebuild if he's interested, of course. And you look at it like, well, let's load up at wing and try to make it work at center. See what happens. We'll just have stud wings all around. Because I don't know what the alternative is if he's really one of the only guys. Well, you got to wait for the following free agency and just hope and price your need is available. Now, does that mean blank check? That's up for debate, but it's these kind of guys aren't supposed to hit free agency. And we knew right away this guy was all about the money, and at this point playing where he wants to play, because he was like a year into the league. They had rough contact negotiations. So I can't say no. I really can't say no to answer your question blanketly. That's a word. Yeah, probably. Yeah, you got these guys don't hit free agency, and if they do, you got to go for them. But I would still feel out the field first before I just went all in.
Yeah, I agree. I hear you about the centers. Look, I'm at the point, and maybe it's just the last 10 years or whatever taking its toll, but I'm at the point where I'm like, they might just never get the center unless they're waiting for McDavid. They just might never get that guy. So I'm like, okay, let's say Zegras can fill in at center. You know, if without Kaprizov, I think a lot of people are projecting 65, 60 points, 55. If you put a Zegras, or hell, you even put a Couturier in between a Kaprizov and a Michkov or a Konechny, whoever, you know, I think when you have two guys, and maybe I'm looking too much into this, but you put a Kaprizov and a Michkov on a line, you could put Morgan Frost in the middle of those two. And you know what I mean? And they'll still succeed.
Yeah,
You know
I get your point there. And I guess they're gonna roll with, Luchenko, Couturier, Nesbitt, and Berglund, I guess. Because that's all they got, all wings, and that'll be, if that's their centers, even if they're not that good, well, we loaded up at wing. But then there's defense too to consider. Like, they still have holes at defense, and you're blowing your load, your cap on a winger, which you already have a lot of wingers. You just took the 6th overall pick, you drafted a winger, and now you're going to go out and sign a winger for like a huge chunk of your cap. Like, it's a tough sell. At the end of the day, get good players. I get it, and I can even be talked into it. But there's got to be some kind of like, all right, well, if we're doing that, we're trading this guy and this guy for something and being real aggressive about it and whatever. But, I wouldn't be 100% against it, but it's going to be, oh, geez, I wonder what step 2, 3, and 4 are going to be, because you got to try to make this work. And you got to be careful on waiting for certain players, because things might not turn out the way you can. Like look at the Flyers goaltending situation this year. Let's say McDavid does make it to free agency, and our goaltending is just as much as a joke as it was last year, maybe slightly better. You think he's going to want to come here? I mean, look what he's dealing with in Edmonton. He's going to go from that situation to this situation because of what? Michkov? Like, you can't bank on that. You really got to. They got to save money for their needs, but at the same time, the only player available who's interested in you too, is a really good player, and it doesn't fit. I guess you got to bite the bullet, because what's the alternative? You don't do anything and kick the can down the road to next year. If you raise ticket prices and told fans that we're turning a corner and brought in Tocchet, like, it just doesn't make.
I think things are going to get a little. It's going to be fun to be a Flyers fan, I think, again in the next couple of years here. Maybe not during the season this year. I think this offseason is going to be fun. Maybe next year will be fun. We'll start adding at the trade deadline again. And that kind of leads us into the state of the organization press conference today, Jack. And I'm going to bring up the video here. We'll listen to each question from the media members. We'll listen to the responses from Hilferty or Jones. And then Jack and I will give our opinions. So let's get started here. You ready, Jack?
Let's do it.
Making sure that we don't jump ahead of ourselves, that we get our cap space in a good place. But I sit here a year later and say that I feel really good about where we're headed. This patient approach is working. Excited about Coach Tocchet coming in, and feel really good that we're going to have a successful year. How we define successful year, how I define successful year, consistent with last year, is not necessarily the playoffs, although that would be great as a fan, the fan in me, but just see improvement throughout the year in our younger players, and that competitive edge continue to grow. But all in all, we're excited about the season and happy to answer any questions. John?
Okay, so we just heard Dan Hilferty there. There's a few things, Jack, and I think the first part was he is happy with the way things are going, happy with the rebuild and the patient approach. that Danny Briere has taken over. And before we get to the second part where he mentions playoffs, thoughts on, what are your thoughts on how things have kind of played out? They have been somewhat patient. It seems like ages ago that they moved on from Provorov. That the trade that, in my opinion, sort of kickstarted everything here, kind of signaled, hey, we're changing up the locker room. We know Provorov's sort of, kind of unfortunately, he was a lot of the backbone of the team. Maybe not publicly, but I think as a player, like, he was one of the guys that they were going to build around. So when they moved him out, it was kind of, let's get this thing going. Here we are now. What is this? 3 years later?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what year that was. I want to say 2020. It was the summer of 2022.
Okay. Yeah, about
3
years.
Was it? It was, because it wasn't the same. Was it the same year we drafted Michkov? I don't think it was, because we used that pick to draft Bonk, right? So I guess summer of 2022, if that sounds right.
I think it is. I can, I have something here that I'm using for our Breaking Briere episodes. That'll be back next week, by the way. That I can look up the date in which they traded Ivan Provorov, and that was June 6th, 2023. So just a little bit over 2 years ago. Yeah.
Because I was thinking when they traded for Aristo, that was 2021. That would have been the summer. So they had a bad year in between that. So yes, so 2023, it's 2 years later, 2 and a chunk, which isn't that bad, but it's always a long ride with us because we know what's coming. We saw how bad things were. But as far as when Briere took over, yeah, he's about 2.5 years in. And this is just a basic disclaimer. I knew we kind of, well, first off, I agree. It's not like he said anything wrong. It has been a patient approach, and I can't argue with the assets they brought in. Michkov, especially. Michkov alone makes half of this worth it. And yeah, we like what we see in Lukchenko, Martone, and some other guys. And there's a potential goaltender of the future coming along. And you brought in Taka, decided this was a destination at some point to sign here and help right the ship. And it's just like, remember how bad things were under not so much Fletcher, but like Dave Scott and then that front office. It's night and day. It's night and day difference. So I can't argue with that. They're headed in the right direction. What we're all really want to know about is part 2 of the rebuild, where you start to transition from the losing and the acquiring assets to the, what he just said, everybody taking a step up. And yeah, playoffs would be great, but as long as they can't be finishing bottom 3 again. Now, you and me might be okay with that for a draft pick, but that's not going to bode well for free agency and whatnot. And then you're probably a little bit worried about some of your players. Although it might all come down to goaltending. So yeah, just a basic disclaimer. Can't really argue with anything.
No. Yeah, this is a rebuild, right? 3 years. Usually, I think, at least for me, you start to see the fruits of a rebuild. This would be, what would this be, year 4? This would have been Tortorella's 4th year, right?
Yeah. It's just what
I think. So I think this would be the 4th season, 3rd off season, 4th season. Usually you start to see stuff 3, 4, 5 years. So we're almost there. 4th season's coming. Year 2 of Michkov, Porter Martone, Jet Luchenko, Oliver Bonk, guys like that coming up. Zavragin, Bjarnason's in the AHL. We're looking forward to this season now. I thought it was interesting that Hilferty said if they don't make the playoffs, doesn't mean the season will be a failure, which kind of tells you again, the mindset is still player growth. It's not, to make the playoffs. In my opinion, making the playoffs and getting blown out first round doesn't really mean anything. But let's kind of press play here and see what Jonesy has to say, and maybe there'll be more that we can touch on. Ready?
All right.
Yeah, I would agree with Dan on all of that. I'm really excited to get things started this year. It feels a little bit different from the first 2 years. Starting to progress. Our players are continuing to move forward, and we're doing everything we can to ensure that continues to happen. Feel really good about where Danny has the team now and for the future. And I like the way the plan is coming together, but I also appreciate how honest Danny has been with you guys and kind of laying out the plan and then sticking to it. some of that is by design. Sometimes you need a little bit of luck along the way too. And so far things are working out the right way. So we'll continue to grind away and try to get it right.
Yeah. And I think one more point. When you think of the strength of the league, the cap space continuing to go up, we felt like we were behind the 8 ball, not having any space at all. Now, as we look forward, you like to say, Jonesy, that we're not about moving things out. We're about growing now and building this thing, and that's an exciting place to be, especially as, again, the cap continues and we have some room to maneuver.
Yep.
Okay, interesting things there. So at the end is what kind of piques my interest, and that's what we were kind of touching on, Jack. Where now it's, they're not so much sellers anymore. They're not looking to sell at this year's deadline. The goal of this season is for player growth and development. And he mentions players later on in the press conference here, Jack. But, we had Danny Briere on while he was still assistant to the general manager. And I always go back and reference that episode. And if you guys haven't listened to it yet, I'll release it. But I think it was like 4 years, whenever he was assistant to the GM. I don't know if that was season 4 for us or season 5, maybe even season 3. I don't remember. Just type HW Hockey or High and Wide Radio, Danny Briere episode in your search, and it'll pop up. Everything he said in that episode, when I asked him, like, what would be what's the plan, or what would you do as GM? He's doing it, and if, maybe you have a problem, somebody will have a problem with the speed of it all or what have you. Sticking to his guns. What did you think of what Jonesy had to say there, Jack?
Yeah, it's everything we talked about, and Briere has been pretty transparent with the fans, which again is night and day from the previous regime. And we've been very grateful for that, and we propped him up because of that. And the things that needed to be kept quiet, that were kept quiet, were understandable things. Like the Cutter Gauthier situation. Like, you want to get what you can for him, so it can't exactly be out there. But for the most part, he's had a plan. He's told us what he's going to do, and he's done it. He's a newer thinking GM. He understands, like, you can't just buy whatever you need. You can't just put Band-Aids on massive wounds and expect things to just suddenly turn around and be fixed. You're going to have to break it all down and rebuild your foundation. The 2 previous regimes before this really screwed things up. And the only way to get out of some bad contracts and to wait things out, you don't have to do one and then the other. You can wait these contracts out, get rid of what you can, but at the same time, accumulate assets and bring in young players and, learn under some kind of structure, and then come out of it with a couple of pretty decent assets. Yes, luck. Jonesy mentioned luck. I think of Michkov when I think of luck. You do not get a guy like that at 7. Between where the world was at the time, him being Russian and certain teams ahead of us, like, that was 100% luck. So that, mixed with his plan, his overall vision, outside of positional need, it is coming together. And and Jonesy also kind of alluded to, this is kind of like part 2 of the rebuild. We're coming out of the acquiring assets, and we're going to see what we can do. And obviously, Hilferty finishes up with the cap, and this is something we discuss all the time, on how much cap they're going to have this offseason, who's going to be a free agent, who's coming off contracts they're not going to bring back. Ryan Ellis counters ticking down even more, things like that. So it's all stuff we know and discuss, and that's because Danny Briere has had a plan and he stuck to it, and I'm here for it. We are, most of us are.
Yeah, I think, look, it's a little premature because we're in September. The 2025-26 season hasn't started yet. But I think if you're a fan and you want a reason to get excited, I'm not going to tell you not to be, because I think those times are on their way. The times to get excited, the times when the Flyers are in on every player again, I think are coming back as soon as this summer. Or, who knows, if they're playing well, maybe the trade deadline. I think those times are coming back, right? Because the first 2-3 years of a rebuild, specifically this one, I'll speak for myself, I'm not getting overly excited about, much of anything, because we're in the, let's clean house. Let's slowly acquire some pieces. Let's do all the boring, like, it's the boring phase of a rebuild. It's what it is. Right. And so now Jonesy says it's the growth phase. The growth phase usually leads to we're going to acquire whatever we don't have phase. And that for me gets a little exciting. I like watching players develop, right? Tyson Forster's a guy, obviously Michkov, guys like Drysdale. Can Cam York bounce back? We'll see. Although these guys will talk about it later in the presser, but this year could be a massive year for growth. And I think during a rebuild, that's mainly why you're watching, right? It's to watch your own guys grow and get better so that you can get to the point where you can start acquiring star power or high-end players at the very least. So exciting times are coming, I think. I'm getting excited right now, Jack.
Step one of solidifying the core. So it's a big season for that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's fast forward a little bit more in our video here.
So it's open to you guys.
Keith, I guess I'll
Yep.
the first question towards you. Obviously, you added this summer, you made moves to try to improve the team. Why was this summer the time to start pivoting and start trying to get better?
Yeah, I think we owed that to our players that are here. They've done everything that we've asked of them. We've moved out a lot of their friends. We've, taken away players at a time when other teams are building to try to make a playoff run. We've continued to accumulate assets to try to help us in the future. And a lot of our top players have been patient with that. So I do think that played into it. And really, we're just in a better position to be able to move forward. So a lot of things go into that, but I think our execution so far has been solid. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the next steps come into play.
What would some of those things be, maybe more specifically, that gives you confidence that the moves you made this summer will measurably
Well,
improve the team?
we're a deeper team. There's way more options for our coaching staff. And at the trade deadline, just as an easy example, we're not going to be giving away our players to gain future assets. That's, unless there was something crazy that happened. But that's the plan as we sit here today.
Okay. So that's interesting to me because a guy like Christian Dvorak's only here for 1 year. We'll see if he's a Flyer after the trade deadline or even after the season, what have you. But yeah, he pretty much says what we were already talking about there, right, Jack?
Yeah, and he said it was well said. We owe it to some of our players. To me, that is true, but it's also like, yeah, we re-signed Travis Konechny long term. We'd like to be somewhat competitive while he's still in his earlier part of that contract, not when he's an old man hanging on and a little bit of an albatross. So, I mean, that definitely goes hand in hand.
Yeah. And, guys like Konechny, Sanheim, who have been here through a lot of the BS, hopefully it's sooner rather than later for them to start having some playoff success. Okay. Let's move on here because Carter Hart's name comes up. And I'm sure they expected to be asked. And I believe it's the next question here. So let's get into what they have to say about Carter Hart.
Question on Carter Hart. If Carter Hart is reinstated, will you guys make a move and inquire about him, or what's your feeling on that?
Well, at this point, we're going to make no comment on that situation. The NHL's made it clear they'll speak first, but right now we're not prepared to comment at all about the Carter Hart situation.
Are you even allowed to talk to him right now, or not?
The NHL has told us they're running the show.
Okay, Jack, your first thoughts when hearing that?
I'll be back. No, it's exactly what I would have said. He's not lying. Like they can't do anything. Why even make speculation? Even if they could, why even make speculation? Well, they just signed Vladar. You got Harrison. We're gonna talk a little bit later about some of the other goalies. And you can't. They gotta like be approved back into the league before you can even sniff that conversation. So why even bother? So good for Sam for asking a follow-up too. But I didn't even think that was going to be asked. And the second it was, Hilferty handled it right. We can not allowed to comment. End story. So it is what it is.
You know what? Before I say what I think there, I think Sam Carchidi takes a lot of crap, but he asks the tougher questions, in my opinion. And I think today's fan gets annoyed at Sam for being a little tougher and asking those questions. But Sam's usually the guy asking those questions, you know?
I'll say this, and because it backs that up. A lot of these pressers, especially back when Fletcher and them were doing them, I used to be like, why are we even wasting our time?
Right.
What is this? Like, come on. And the reason that we do this, or they do this, or we cover it, every now and then somebody says something that makes you go, whoa, what did you just say? And it's questions like that that sometimes can pull that out, and obviously it's 9 times out of 10 in Sam's case, 99 times out of 100, it's not going to work, but we're hanging around for that one time it does. So I'll give him credit.
But like, as a fan out there, and if you guys, comment if you agree or not, but as a fan, don't you want somebody to ask about Carter Hart? Don't you want to know? Even if, because look, the response they gave to me was an answer to Sam's question. They had the opportunity to flat out say, no, we are not interested in bringing him back. We're going to roll with who we got. Right. And I think Jonesy later on in the video here makes a point to bring up Urson. Right. But Hilferty deflected straight to the we're not allowed to talk about it. He could have just said no. The possibility to me of bringing Carter Hart back is still open. They have to wait for the league to clear everything. That's what he just said. That's what he told. That's what my ears heard. Because he had the opportunity to say no. We're not going to, Carter Hart is a free agent. The NHL has to clear him. We wish him luck. He didn't say that,
Possible. I also looked at body language there. It's my second time watching it, but I thought I noticed Jonesy look at Hilferty like, he'll be taking this question, right?
Yeah. All right. So let me see here. Does Jonesy answer next here? No. Okay. There's another question asked. Okay. So let's get to our next point.
This question's for Jonesy. Obviously, 2 years ago, you guys came pretty close to making the playoffs. You get to game 82. How concerned organizationally are you that last year was a step back in terms of performance?
Not at all. I do believe the year before we felt pretty good about our team going into that season, but we recognized that we needed to be more flexible in the future. And I think that's what led to some of the selling off at the trade deadline. Just, Sean Walker comes to mind when I think back to that time. Last year was kind of a steady type of progression up until the trade deadline. It was clearer that that's the way we had to go last year. It was easier in that regard. But recognizing what was on the horizon made us feel pretty good about things. And I think the execution of the draft is another very important step for us. We've had a couple of, actually with Danny in charge, I guess it's 3 drafts now, and feel really good about the accumulation of talent, not just assets. There's some talented players that are coming. And I think that's going to help us as far as building that foundation from our younger players advancing and some of our top young guys that have been in the NHL for a few years now in a position to really take on roles of leadership and help us continue to advance to becoming a team that's going to be, eventually a playoff team on a regular basis, which is not an easy thing to do in this league.
Okay. So I'll start with the end point there that Jonesy made. The goal from the start was to be a playoff, not just a playoff contender, but a Stanley Cup contender year in and year out. And if you're a Stanley Cup contender, you're in the playoffs every season, right? And that's been the goal from the beginning. And I think the goal is easy to lose sight of when you're a fan and you have to wait through the slop. And we've already waited through 10 years of slop. But during a rebuild, that's, you got to do a little bit more waiting. Jack, what are your thoughts to Jonesy's answer there?
No, I like it because a lot of the people were confused, and a lot of the Torts haters come to mind. 2 years ago, when they were good and they were like, we really should have made the playoffs. To most of us, it was like, yeah, that'd be great, but we're rebuilding. Like, they got to sell at the deadline. People were upset that they sold at the deadline. They lost heart around January, and then Ersson couldn't handle the load. And, so let's say they make the playoffs. Like, I've seen people argue, it's better if this team and these players get some playoff action. I'm like, Michkov wasn't even here yet. He didn't even play in that season. So, like, you're getting playoff experience for guys that outside of Coots and Konechny and Sanheim aren't going to be here.
Mhm.
Like, to me, it just, no, you needed to get assets. You probably needed a higher draft pick, to be honest with you. But it was good to see them playing well because we've seen so much slop, honestly. And you don't want to build your team in the St. Louis Blues style of way where 2019, I think it was 2019, like where you just hope for lightning in a bottle and hope you win it all. No, you want to have a sustained record of making the playoffs year in, year out. And then whether you make the right deadline acquisition or everybody gets hot at the right time or your goalie gets hot at the right time, and then you just go through the playoffs and you win the whole damn thing. But just hoping and praying for one go of it, it's a silly way to do it. And the only way you can be a perennial contender for the cup and for the playoffs is to have a great core. And the only way to get a really great, solid core is to get assets. So you have to do what they did. So yeah, they overachieve in year 2 or 2 years ago rather. And last year it's like, oh, is that a step back? It's like, I think that was more where I thought they were the year before, except for they had the goaltending 2 years ago. They certainly did not last year. That was a fiasco because remember they added Michkov, but their goaltending was an absolute travesty. So to me, it didn't really matter either one. It was, no, we wanted to accumulate assets because we're in a rebuild. Making the playoffs in year 1 or 2 of a rebuild doesn't really help your cause. You want to make sure you have the assets and whatever you need for years for we're kind of where we are right now. When you turn around the rebuild into we're turning the corner years. So this is year 1 of that. Now is when it starts to really matter. And I think that's what he's explaining here. It wasn't about then, it's about now. We need to get assets then. We did, like we told you we would. And we don't really care about the results all that much. We care about individual results, like Sanheim turning his career around. That was great. Like you want that. That's stuff they care about. But as far as overall team success, that doesn't really matter until now. And that's what he's explaining in the assets we have and what they were able to do with the draft and the cap space they opened up. It all goes hand in hand.
Yeah, that was a tough position with the Sean Walker. Dude, I'm so afraid to say his name because I don't want to get it wrong. Sean Walker.
Right. Sean Walker.
Like when it's funny, like in golf, you have like swing thoughts, like right before you go hit the ball, like crazy thoughts pop into your mind before you hit the ball, And before I say Sean Walker, I know it's Sean Walker. Before I say it though, Scott Walker pops in. Who else? Matt Walker, all the Walkers, Antoine Walker,
Skywalker,
all the Walkers pop into my head before I say Sean Walker. I question, is his name Sean or was it Matt or is it Scott?
The last second, right?
We got it though. Okay.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, look, they traded one of their better defenders at a trade deadline. I guess it was a season and a half ago. And they lost their franchise goaltender. That will set any team back, let alone a team that lacks the skill and the talent that the Flyers had, especially on the defensive end. And look, they're not a really great offensive team to begin with. They're a team that blocks a lot of shots, keeps guys to the outside kind of thing. Carter, I think we're starting to see, or if you haven't realized it yet, Carter Hart's save percentage might not have, blown anybody away, like 908, yada, yada, but it was above 900.
Above 900.
I think we're starting to see, or if you haven't seen by now, just how important Carter Hart was to this team. Having a good goalie was to this team. And the Flyers aren't the best defensive team. So when you combine not a great defensive team with subpar goaltending, you get Sam Ersson. 890, 880, Fedotov, 870 save percentages. Like the Flyers they haven't been good. And Carter Hart was bailing them out. right? He could have had a higher save percentage than whatever he had, 908, 910. The defense in front of him was crap. When you see a goaltender making, highlight reel saves, flashing across his crease because somebody let the guy in back door, your goalie shouldn't be doing that. So when you see a goalie like Carter Hart making those saves or being caught out of position, it's because the team in front of him stinks. And so I don't know. I'm not saying that you need to be sitting here and appreciate, Carter Hart, and you need to think like this, need to think like that. I guess what I'm saying is Carter Hart wasn't as bad as some people made him out to be. He's a pretty good goalie. And if the Flyers, look, from a purely hockey standpoint, right? Because he was found not guilty. From a purely hockey standpoint, if you put him in with this team, he might win you 5-6 games on his own,
Yeah, I mean, if he's like up to game shape, but they have enough goalies to wait for that if they were to do that. But yeah, I mean, the fact remains, like, of everybody they have and have had, he was hands down the best they've had in however long. And I'm not saying he's Dominik Hasek, but like, he did enough. Look how that team was 2 years ago, and he was a huge part of that. Him and Ersson, and Ersson, once that whole thing fell apart, they become one of the worst goaltending tandems of all time, really. So it matters. It definitely matters, and it didn't matter then because it wasn't about then. It's about today. That's why Tortorella is no longer the coach. That's why certain players have been jettisoned and other players have been brought in, and the prospect pool is strong and all that stuff. And that's all Keith Jones is saying here. It's all about the now. It was never about the then. It's about the now.
Correct. Okay. Let's get to our next part of the video here. Here we go.
Which of your veteran players do you think need to take that step?
So the ones that I comfortably predict will are players like Tyson Forrester, Noah Cates. I think both of those guys showed a lot. Bobby Brink continues to become a better player. Konechny's been there. He's done that. Sanheim has developed into not just a very good player for us, but a real leader on the back end. I really appreciate his development and this commitment to the team. I'm looking for really solid contributions from Cam York. I think his game will come back into a place that it was 2 years ago. I think the last year wasn't a great year for him, but I do believe that he's going to be a big part of our blue line as well. And then I'm a big believer in Sam Ersson. I think that Sam is in a position now, age-wise, and being pushed by, the depth at that position that's there now is going to benefit him as well. So I think that Sam is going to stand up to the test here this year.
Okay, Jack. Kind of bailed out there by picking, some of the Flyers' better players from last year, and Forrester, Cates, and Bobby Brink. Those guys combined were probably the Flyers' best line last season. So, in my opinion, pretty easy to pick the players he did. It was, safe picks. He didn't bring up a player like Drysdale, Zegras, those guys. But he did mention Cam York. He mentioned the down season that he had last year. Expects him to come back into form. Maybe he had some torts issues. And he mentioned Sam Ersson. So I want to ask, do you share the same beliefs there as Keith Jones with Cam York and Sam Ersson?
So he called that he said comfortably feels that way.
Yeah.
I definitely don't feel that way about Ersson. I cannot say I comfortably feel that Sam Ersson will take a step forward. I felt that comfortably last year, and that blew up in my face. That it wasn't all him. He didn't have anybody to spell him. He had spent more time injured again. But at the end of the day, he just couldn't get it done like we thought he could with the proper rest and, usage. And we'll see. Maybe Vladar will change that. But I would not file that under comfortably. Cam York, I feel better about him than Ersson, but I'm still not quite there. He's just not the defenseman I thought we drafted. So I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't hate what I see. I think you need him back there. He blocks a lot of shots. He's defensively sound, positionally sound. Like, the offense, I don't know what happened to it, and they don't seem too interested in giving him a shot. I think Risto gets a shot on the second power play unit when somebody's down before York does. So yeah, I guess I don't know what I just don't know. I don't know what to expect from York. I don't think he's going to get the opportunities to show that offensive side. So what's he going to do? Become a complete lockdown defenseman? Okay. Well, if he does that, then that'll be great. But I don't know. I don't see too much of a jump from last year unless his offensive game comes around. And will he find himself in a situation for that to happen? I don't know. I don't think so. Based on who's still on the roster and how they run their power play, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sort of in the same boat with you there. The thing with me for York is I've accepted him for the player that he is, right? I think when he was drafted, he really was sold as an offensive kind of guy. Yeah, I know he had 20 points in 24 games for Michigan, which that's pretty solid especially for a defenseman. That's almost a point per game. But scored 10 goals once in his career. This is going back to 2017-18 when he was with the under 17 U.S. national team. In talking to, I think, some scouts, and I think even Russ Cohen did this comparison too, but he could just be like a Devon Taves light kind of guy. I know Devon Taves is putting up 50 points with the Avalanche. I'm pretty sure he's partnered up with Cale Makar, right? So, I mean, if you put Cale Makar on the line with Cam York,
Yeah. So,
but if you go back and look at maybe Taves' numbers with the Islanders or his first year with the Avalanche, would you be happy if York turned out to be like that sort of a player?
Yeah, I mean, if he's just a good defensive, it's weird to say this about Cam York, but a defensive defenseman, like a pure defenseman, it seems a little undersized for that. But if he can at least carry the puck out of the zone and get the rush going, and maybe just isn't on the power play and doesn't contribute that much offensively, it's always going to feel like there's some kind of unlocked potential that isn't being used. And, I guess if he locks the rest of it down, you do need guys like that. I'm still going to feel a little miffed at it. Let me just read you Cam York's draft profile. You ready for this?
Yeah, sure.
Cam York, and this is according to NHL Draft Prospects, the Hockey Writers. It's the first one I clicked. Cam York is so good offensively that it's easy to forget sometimes that he's actually a defender. One of the more electric players coming out of the 2019 draft class, York is best pure offensive defenseman available in the draft. Outside of being slightly undersized at 5'11" and 175 pounds, York has everything teams covet in an offensive defenseman with a quick and smooth skating, an elite shot, tremendous passes that almost always find their mark. Whether it's his slap shot, wrist shot, or pass attempt, York is more than capable of moving the puck where he wants it to go with decisiveness and emphasis. That ability lends itself to York's power play potential, as he's also primed to quarterback of an NHL squad's power play unit one day given his skill set. In 63 games last season, York scored 14 goals and 65 points, while also adding a jaw-dropping 11 points, 4 goals, in just 7 World Junior Championship games. While York brings all this and more offensively to his team's blue line, he still lacks defensively, and that could limit where he ends up in the 2019 draft class. He is the exact opposite of what I just read. It's flipped. They crapped all over his defense and said he's purely this defensively, passes that, skating, and he is a good skater. But from what we're seeing, it's almost completely flipped. It's very strange. It's very odd.
You know what? That is interesting, and I do stand corrected because what you read is correct. For whatever reason, on Hockey DB, he's got 2 separate stints in the same year with the U.S. National Development Team there. He's got an exhibition of 35 games and the USHL of 28 games, and he did score 65 and 63. Did he say? Did you read that? Yeah, 65 and 63. I'm sorry, that's right. So yeah, I mean, he was putting up offensive numbers. I wonder if, and look, I'm not blaming Torts for anything. I'm not saying anything negative. I wonder if Torts got his hands on him and he was like, I need this guy to focus on defense, not so much offense. Like there's a lot that I liked about Tortorella. One of the things that irked the hell out of me was the York-Sanheim pairing. So I think, and this is kind of, getting a little bit off topic here, but I thought Sanheim looked great offensively without Cam York. And because Sanheim got to play his natural side, let that happen. They're paying Cam York like a second pair guy, which, we've been saying for a long time, that's what he is. Let York play on the second pair. Let him anchor a second pair, get him a complimentary guy. And maybe he does put up, 35, 40 points in the NHL,
Yeah,
I don't think it's Drysdale, though. I just want to say that's not a pair. If anybody thinks that Drysdale and York can play together, they should not. They shouldn't play together. So I don't know. They got to find the guy for York still. I don't want it to be Sanheim either. I don't want it to be Drysdale.
Yeah, again, like if it was towards holding him back and making him play defense, and now he's opened up to be able to play that offense, I don't know where those opportunities are going to come from. Maybe he could do something at 5-on-5. Maybe they'll give him a shot. Different coaching staff, hopefully so. But best case scenario, he's got the defensive game. I don't want to say locked down, but worlds better than what it was. And if he can just slowly bring out that offensive game, then maybe you really got something there. So that is the absolute most positive thing I'll say about the York situation. Yeah. But yeah, again, where I'm not comfortable at Erson at all. I'm like, no, I don't comfortably believe anything now. Where at York, it's just question marks. I just don't know. So I'm glad they retained him, and we'll see what happens. But it's a weird situation, man.
He'll be one of those guys, along with, because I know everyone's kind of thinking that Drysdale's a project, and he is. And York does a lot of good things, but I'll be watching York as well. And I know that York got paid, so he's going to be here no matter what. But I'll be watching Cam York along with Jamie Drysdale. Okay, let's move on. All right, before we get to the next question in the press conference, give us a second to tell you guys about Fans of Philly.
All right, guys, quick timeout, because if you're a diehard Philly fan, you need to hear about this. Fans of Philly is the ultimate way to hit the road with the Birds, the Flyers, the Phillies, or even the Sixers. We're taking full travel packages, your hotel, your transportation, and yes, the tailgates that are basically legendary at this point, all taken care of for you. No stress, no scrambling for tickets, no worrying about where you're staying. You just show up, throw on your jersey, and enjoy the ride with your fellow diehard Philly fans. So whether it's flying out to see the Eagles take over an opponent's arena, cheering on the Flyers in enemy territory, or making it a full weekend getaway for the Phillies and Sixers games, Fans of Philly has you covered. Trust me, this is the closest you'll get to feeling the players when they roll into town, because the takeover is real. So check them out Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and start planning your next Philly sports road trip today. That's Fans of Philly, where every away game feels like a home game. Fansofphilly.com.
Thank you, Jack. Great read. First one of the year.
Couple mistakes there. They're sticking out to me pretty bad right now, but
we'll get smooth there. That out. We'll smooth it out.
A new read. We'll get there.
Okay, so we're dissecting the State of the Organization press conference. We'll do a couple more questions here. We're going to do a part 1 episode and part 2 episode. So stick around. Okay, let's get into the next question here, Jack.
Keith, going back to what you said a few minutes ago about last year's regression in terms of standings, that it's not that concerning to you because where you see the team going, where you see the organization going. Is it fair to say that if that were to happen again this year, that you maybe wouldn't be as forgiving as maybe?
Yeah, no, that would be disappointing. Yeah, so we definitely want to continue to take steps forward. I believe that we will, and I think we're going to do everything we can to make sure that happens. So in the previous 2 years, we would be quick to make changes in order to get better for the future. Now it would be about staying on course now, which is advancing. It's not about moving back.
And Charlie, the fan in me would be disappointed as well. I mean, it's last year was a real learning experience for me. I guess coming from the business world, I just assume you get on a track and you continue to go up, but that's not the way this game or any professional sports works. But I agree with everything that Jonesy just said.
Okay. So 2 things here. I'm going to touch on the Hilferty part there, Jack, and you want to do the Jonesy part?
Sure.
Okay. So I thought that was really interesting from Hilferty there. In business, you kind of control how things go. In sports, I guess he's saying you kind of you got to be patient. You got to wait for everything to catch up. Like, players aren't robots. So, especially with the Flyer situation with the cap and whatnot, you just got to wait for stuff to come off the books. Like, no one's going to do you any favors. So interesting stuff there from Hilferty to recognize that it's not a typical business, and he doesn't have his hands all over everything like maybe Comcast did in the past. So a little bit refreshing to hear that from Dan Hilferty. Okay, take it away, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, and it would be based on everything we had just said, where they're at, how they're not going to be trading anything at the deadline unless something crazy happens. Bringing in Tocchet, moving on from Torts, and you have to attract free agents. Kind of what I kind of alluded to earlier about the free agents this offseason. If they have that, we all know they've had that circled forever, however long. And you cannot come into this season and do exactly what you did the last couple of seasons. Find yourselves maybe somewhat competitive at the beginning of the year, start to lose steam, little hiccup, maybe pop back up for a little bit, and then you're drafting bottom 5, 10 again. You cannot do that, because then everybody's going to look at you and be like, whatever you're doing out there, there's some nice pieces, but it's not working. And nobody's going to be interested in coming to your team unless you really overpay them. And even then, as you can see with Kaprizov, that's not always going to work. So it would be disappointing. I understand that. Torts was the rebuild guy. Tocchet's the turn the corner guy. They're not turning the corner if they don't at least challenge for a playoff spot. They should be in a position come trade deadline, which is like March, where they're like, maybe they're just out of a playoff position where they're not going to sell because they're either in a playoff position or they're fighting for it. They're probably not ready to add yet, so they're just going to stay put. They need to just be in that position at least. If they're looking like they got to sell because there's no chance they can make the playoffs, that would be a massive disappointment. And I already brought up the tickets going up. That's part of it. We've waited long enough. You've said that. We went through slop. We had to go through future slop. I mean, all signs based on what they are doing, what the team is, what Briere is doing, front office Briere, two different things with the ticket prices and the team building and whatnot. We've given them enough development time for what they have right now to make things happen. I personally, I'm a little nervous about the goaltending still, but based on what we've been told, their trajectory and what they want to do, having a bad season would be I think it'd be a huge disappointment. And I'm not saying they need to make the playoffs. They just need to be competitive for a long time, but they cannot finish bottom 5. As much as you and I would love to pick, they're going to be out on anybody in free agency for the most part. Nobody's going to want to come here. And then what are you looking at? Then what's your plan? So you can rectify things and change things and whatnot, but they've even acquired 2027 first round picks with the idea that they'll be trading those for a playoff run. Well, they got to make the playoffs first. That's the hardest step. So they got to at least be in the ballpark. So all signs, everything they've done, it points to it being, this is the first time, if they're not there, that it'll be a big disappointment.
For sure. Okay. Let's move on to the next part of the presser here. Here we go.
I was going to ask, it's been 5 years since the team made the playoffs. It's matches the franchise's longest drought. How do you balance wanting to stay patient and stay the course, but also trying to understand that some fans are maybe itching to get back into things?
Well, Jordan, the way I look at it, it's again, as the fan, you want every year to compete, to get into the playoffs. You want fans to get excited. You want to sell tickets. You want people in the arena. The way I look at this, and certainly the stage in my career, the relationship with the Comcast parent, Brian Roberts, we agree. Keith agrees. Danny agrees that we're going to just take our time and do this the right way. Point being, there's no pressure from me in my role or from an ownership perspective beyond me to say we need to do something drastic, dramatic, because we need to have a better shot at the playoffs. This is about that steady growth, building the number of young players that are coming up through the system, making sure positionally we're doing the right things, bringing the coaching staff in, starting with Toc, that we think can really continue to develop these players. We're gonna wait this out. Now, I'm not getting any younger, but at the same time, we're going to do this at a pace that, what I like to say, and said this to the players the other day, we want to build a culture of sustainable sustainable excellence, not just a shot next year and then it falls off after. So there's no, there's fan time pressure, but there's no pressure from the perspective of it's got to be this year or next year. When we do it, you'll see it. I hope you're beginning to see it, but the results will be there, and it'll be our goal to sustain that for years to come.
I think as a fan, when you hear they want sustained success, you should be excited about that, right?
Absolutely. You don't want to be in a situation like where 2 years ago, let's say they do make the playoffs, and then you're all, oh my God, we're in the playoffs. And then you have a season like you did this year. No, you want to be there every year. Those are the teams where you eventually break through and you know, anything can happen. You really just got to get in and anything can happen. But if you're a powerhouse and anything can happen and you're always there, and then your players are seasoned playoff experience vets, then you can win. You know, they're very, very rare other circumstances where you just, everything falls into place and you make it. So this is the right way to do things. It hurts, it's painful, and it takes a long time, but great things come to those who wait, and hopefully they do it the right way. And that's how you make a sustained contender. Is you have to be patient. You have to grow your own players. You can't just go sign everybody. You can't panic and go trade out a bunch of assets for a 1-year guy because you have to make it this year because, you know, and if you have this sustained prospect pool coming up and replenishing anybody you lose, whether it be through free agent trade or injury, you have assets to go get what you want every year because you've built up so much. You have cap space available because you were smart with your cap dollars, and some of the old regimes, the signings they made, those are now off the books. You're not held down by those. It's everything. And that's how you stay a sustained contender. Obviously, it's your core, and it's everything you can do to help your core with all those things I just named. And right now, they got to wait out a few contracts. Their money's about to get freed up. Young players are still figuring it out to just, you know, push the panic button and trade 3 first-round picks for a big defenseman. Oh, yeah, it snuck. We made the playoffs. We got bounced in the first round, and that guy went to free agency. What does that do for you? Nothing. You get a little playoff experience, and you lost a bunch of assets. Like, that's what he's saying. It's like, we're going to get there. We want to see improvement. We're going to get there, and when we get there, we're going to make sure we stay there. And that is, I couldn't agree more.
Well said. Okay, that's going to do it for part 1 of our State of the Organization episode. Jack and I will be back with part 2 shortly. We're going to put this one out now, and you'll find the second episode out as well. So you don't need to take a break in between listening to part 1 and part 2. You're going to have 2 hours of HW hockey listening pleasure for your eye holes or your ear holes, whatever you're doing, if you're watching or listening. So we're going to wrap this one up. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe. Help us on our quest for 2,000 YouTube subscribers. Like and leave a comment for us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, and set alerts so you're the first to know when we drop a new show. For all of our latest episodes, articles, and updates, head over to hwhockey.net. Don't go anywhere. Jack and I will be back in just a second. Make sure you head over to part 2. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.